The summer sun cast golden reflections over the shimmering community pool. Laughter and splashing filled the air as families enjoyed the warm afternoon. James Carter, a well-built black man in his late 40s, stretched on a pool chair, letting the warmth sink into his skin. But he could feel it, the weight of someone's gaze. Across the deck, Karen Whitmore, a middle-aged woman with a sharp bob and an ever-present scowl, was watching him. Her expression was one of suspicion, not curiosity. James sighed. He had seen this look before. Karen stood up, adjusting the straps on her sun hat, and approached him with slow, deliberate steps. "Excuse me," she said with an exaggerated politeness. "Are you visiting someone?" James looked up, already anticipating where this was going. "Here we go." "No," he replied. "I live here." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't believe him. Karen gave James a once-over, taking in his swim trunks and relaxed posture. "Really?" she said, her voice dripping with doubt. James forced himself to stay calm. "Yes, I've lived here for years." Karen scoffed. "Funny. I've never seen you before." James shrugged. "Well, I don't recall meeting you either." Karen's smile thinned. "That's because I'm new, but I know all the homeowners here." "So, whose guest are you?" James exhaled, keeping his voice level. "I don't need to be anyone's guest. I own a home here." Her expression twisted. "Oh, which unit?" 214, James answered. Karen let out a short, triumphant laugh. "Oh, that's impossible. I know the real owners of that house." James tilted his head. "You do?" Karen crossed her arms. "Yes, a lovely family lives there. A white couple and their kids." A pause. Then James chuckled softly. "That lovely family is my wife and children." Karen's face froze mid-smirk. For a split second, Karen's confidence wavered. But then her face hardened. "You expect me to believe that?" James was done entertaining her nonsense. "Believe whatever you want," he said. "I don't have to prove anything to you." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, with dramatic flair, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling security," she announced, loud enough for the nearby families to hear. "We have a trespasser." James sighed, watching as she whispered into her phone, shooting him wary glances. A tall black man, yes, acting suspicious. Around the pool, conversation stopped. Some residents exchanged nervous glances, clearly uncomfortable. Others shook their heads, already sensing the injustice at play. James refused to look away. Let her dig her own grave. Minutes later, the gates swung open. A uniformed security officer rushed in, and the moment he saw James, his entire body stiffened in recognition. Karen stood with her arms crossed, smirking as the officer approached. "Thank goodness. This man refuses to leave." The security officer, a younger man named Brian, looked visibly uneasy. His gaze darted from Karen to James, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. Karen raised an eyebrow. "Well, aren't you going to handle this?" Brian cleared his throat. Chief Carter?" Karen blinked. "Excuse me." Brian's voice wavered. "Ma'am, this is Chief James Carter." Karen let out a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous." James finally stood, towering over Karen. With practiced ease, he pulled a leather badge wallet from his swim bag and flipped it open. The golden shield glinted in the sun. "I'm the chief of police," James said calmly. "And I also serve on this community security board." Karen staggered back. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You're the police chief?" she stammered. James nodded. "I am." Brian, still looking shaken, turned to Karen. "Ma'am, Chief Carter owns a home here. He's lived in this community for years." The color drained from Karen's face. I thought." James raised an eyebrow. "Thought what?" Karen stumbled over her words. "I just didn't think, James folded his arms. "That someone like me could live here." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's eyes darted around the pool. No one came to her defense. In fact, several neighbors were now glaring at her. Brian sighed. "Sir, would you like me to escort her off the premises?" Karen's head snapped toward him. What? No, I live here. James studied her. The easy thing to do would be to kick her out, but that wouldn't teach her anything. No. James said finally, she can stay. Karen exhaled in relief. But, James added, she should probably take some time to get to know her neighbors before embarrassing herself again. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Karen hunched her shoulders, avoiding everyone's eyes. She had never felt smaller. By that evening, the incident had spread like wildfire. The community group chat was buzzing. Residents expressed their shock, their disappointment, and their support for James. The next morning, James received a call from the HOA board. "We'd like to organize a diversity seminar," the director said, "to make sure incidents like this don't happen again. Would you be willing to lead it?" James smiled. Absolutely. Karen, on the other hand, found herself shunned. Neighbors no longer greeted her with friendly waves. Some whispered as she walked by. Others simply turned away. She had become the woman who called security on Chief Carter. And no one was about to forget it. A week later, Karen hesitantly approached James outside his home. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she mumbled. James studied her. "What exactly are you sorry for?" Karen hesitated. For, not realizing who you were." James shook his head. "That's not the problem, Karen. The problem is why you assumed I didn't belong." Karen looked down. She had no excuse. That weekend, James stood at the front of the clubhouse, leading a packed seminar on racial bias. Karen sat in the front row, eyes fixed on her lap. It was time to face the truth. Karen slowly started making amends, learning, listening, changing. It would take time, but for the first time, she truly saw. James walked through his community, feeling a sense of change in the air. Maybe, just maybe, today had made a difference.